Welcome to the Thrive TV Show with Lauren Parsons, helping you boost your health, energy, and productivity.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Thrive TV Show. I'm Lauren Parsons, your host, and today I'm joined by Gareth Beck, who is here from New Zealand. So welcome, Gareth.
Kia ora. How are you going?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks
And today we're having a discussion about mental health in the workplace, which is so important, and I know Gareth's really passionate about. So he's going to be talking a bit about where to start, how do you have a mentally healthy workforce, what are some of the pitfalls, and also what can we do going forward. So before we get into all of that, I'd love to just ask you some of my this and that questions, Gareth.
Okay.
So tell me, summer or winter?
I am a spring or autumn person, but if I had to choose, I'd have to say summer.
Okay, nice. Cake or cookies?
Cookies. Anybody who knows me knows that.
Okay. Photograph or painting?
Photograph.
Okay. Would you rather play 10 different musical instruments beautifully or speak 10 different languages fluently?
Languages. I love to travel, so they would come in very useful.
Okay, all right. So next question is Taj Mahal or Eiffel Tower?
I've been to the Eiffel Tower, so Taj Mahal.
Okay. Smoothie or ice cream?
Ice cream. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely ice cream.
And tea or coffee?
Ooh, I don't drink tea or coffee. I'm a strange British man that doesn't drink tea or coffee. So I probably have to say tea.
Yeah. Okay.
To choose
or neither. Neither's
or
fine.
neither. Yeah.
Is what you want. Lovely. So Gareth's background's in health and safety, and he was the winner of the Emerging Practitioner Award at the Safeguard 2020 Awards. Over the past few years, he's focused his attention more and more around wellbeing in the workplace. He uses risk management to tackle psychological risks and reduce mental health challenges in the workforce. Gareth believes that workplaces can and should educate and equip staff to create a ripple effect for our whānau's mental health to thrive. And I love that the word ripple effect, particularly if anyone's heard me speak, you'll know that I always talk about my vision is to equip and inspire leaders to be able to find that sweet spot between boosting both well-being and productivity and create positive, energized workplaces. And I have it on the image with the ripple going out. You know, if there's one thing you can do as a leader, as an individual, that's going to flow onto everyone around you. So it's so great to have you here, Gareth. So tell us, to start with, just tell us a bit about how did you get into what you're doing now?
So I always love this question because I think a lot of people are very interested in this area and trying to get into this. But so I get asked this quite a lot, and kind of by accident a little bit, and also just because of my passion and wanting to be in this area. I think if you really want to be in it, you kind of end up in it eventually. But actually, I kind of started on this journey. We were traveling back in the UK, visiting family and friends, and we caught up with a friend at a pub, and we were just talking, you know, as you do at a pub with your pints and things. And she said, "Oh, I'm going to see a psychologist tomorrow." And we're like, "Oh, you know, the kind of awkward thing you did probably 5-6 years ago." We're like, "Oh, I don't know really what to say about that." But we kind of moved the conversation on, and then she sort of gave us a text and a call the next day to say, "I've been diagnosed with severe depression and alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic." And we're like, "That's not what I saw in the." That's not my perception of depression. That's not my perception of alcoholic in the pub that day. And it was from there, then I came back into work. It's kind of a sequence of events that kind of led me to here. And then I came back into work, and I think it was Are You OK Day? And somebody was telling their story. And I was like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. Can we do something about this, about educating people in the workplace? And there's a few sort of rumbles from around New Zealand and the world around, you know, getting this into the workplace. So then I started to sort of learn about this. How can we change this? How can we bring this into the workplace? You know, get that sort of mental health literacy so everybody understands, reduce that stigma around that. As I sort of said, as you said in the intro, around that ripple effect, can we educate our people to then go out into our communities? So then I just started to not be a keyboard warrior, but be sort of that person on LinkedIn to talk about this, to talk about it in the workplace, be that person to be like, we need to start changing this. And obviously my background is in health and safety, but having that risk management approach has really helped me, I think, in this, in terms of going, understanding what are the risks to our people. And your listeners or your viewers may be sort of familiar with ISO 45003, which gives people a bit of an idea of what are the risk factors are. So then using tools like that, and there's many of them around the world that you can access, to then look at how we can change the work and the design of work and the workplace to be a better workplace where people can thrive. So in terms of how I got into it, it's kind of just being in that space, wanting to be in that space, meeting people who are in that space, and yeah, just wanting to learn. I guess that's kind of how I've got there, really. There's no sort of, yeah, what's the word? There's no sort of divine
one
way of
defining moment.
exactly,
No,
but there was a series of things that kind of lined up to me sort of taking that path.
Mm-hmm. And I know that in New Zealand, where you are currently based as a business partner, you've got such a focus on well-being. I got to meet Liam Scopes Prodigies, who's really passionate about well-being and mental health. So tell me, how do you define mental well-being?
Define mental well-being. Well, I think it's a balance. I think that well-being in itself is the definition is just around balance, and we see that in New Zealand around Te Whare Tapawha, around the four walls of the house, having that balance. But mental well-being, you need to. I always say in sort of trainings, we need to have stress. We need stress in our lives to get up and about. So that stress is, I try and sell it as a good thing. I think it's got a bit of a bad rap and a bit of a bad name. So we need that, but we also need those times when we're not have that as well to relax. So for me, it's a balance. That's basically how I define it in terms of whether it's well-being or mental well-being, because those two terms get sort of intermingled quite a lot.
They do, yeah. And I think we often hear people talking about mental health and talking about it in a negative sense. I heard a speaker once who talked about how, news presenters have talked about this person was suffering from mental health. And so we automatically flip to a negative, which really is actually mental illness. And it's great to realize we all have mental health. And I quite like the term mental fitness as well, which helps, that link towards the fact that we can influence our mental well-being, our mental fitness, that we can exercise, that we can do things that improve it.
I do in my trainings. One of the things I talk about is obviously mental health. We do a well-being session for pilots and for cabin crew. And one of the session or the activities I do, I say, everybody, let's do word association. Mental health, what do you think? And the top 5 is always anxiety, depression, stress, struggling, sometimes gets in there, and happiness. And actually, when you think about that, mental health, we always talk about the continuum, right? But actually, everybody's always drawn to that negative of mental health. And so, again, that's what I enjoy doing, is meeting people and engaging with people and trying to change their minds around mental health, and actually saying what you're thinking about there is mental illness or the mental health challenges, and not necessarily mental health. And I always say, now let's do word association with physical health. What sort of words come into your mind? What do they say? They say strength, they say resilience, they say exercise, they say all these positive words. And you're like, well, it's exactly the same thing, but we've just been guided down that path of mental health is mental illness, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you put it into that, because I naturally think of fit and strong and healthy and all of those things. It's so interesting.
Exactly.
And it just reminds me of, the flourishing, languishing scale that, in terms of positive psychology, that traditionally psychology was really all around focusing on taking people that were sick and unwell and mentally unwell, helping them to get up to being okay. And that positive psychology is about taking all of us and helping us to really flourish and thrive. And I guess that we can superimpose that on another horizontal axis of, when we think about, are people flourishing, are people thriving, or are they actually languishing? But then also, do they have mental illness? Do they not? And so we have all these different quadrants. We know that we can have people in our organizations who perhaps actually have a mental illness, but who are also flourishing. We can have people that have mental illness that are not flourishing, and all those different dynamics. We can have people that don't have a mental illness that are just languishing, that they're just not doing great at the moment, but it's not a mental illness. And then we obviously ideally want to have a majority of people that both are flourishing and are mentally well. So yeah, thoughts on that?
I think that model is Key's model of and I think it's just it really speaks to me. I was never quite sure about the continuum, because it kind of is kind of binary. It's either you're well or you're not well. And actually, there's people with mental illnesses who are able to thrive. Really, they're managing it through counselling, through CBT, through drugs, that sort of thing, to manage it. Not those sort of drugs, but yeah, the
Yeah.
drugs from your medical professional to help, so they can thrive in a workplace. And it's again reducing that stigma around that. Yeah. So
Fantastic. And just a reference for those that are listening in, earlier Gareth mentioned Te Whare Tapa Whā. So if you're not familiar with that, that's talking about, the four walls of your whare, that hinangaro, that mental and emotional well-being, that taha tinana, that physical well-being, whānau, that social connection, and also wairua, spiritual well-being and sense of purpose. So I really do like that model and often reference that as well when I do training. So if that's a great kind of background and definition of what is mental well-being and mental flourishing, tell me, where do we start in the workplace? And I know that's a big question, but you said you're going to talk about, where can we start to help to enhance this?
Where can we start? I think there's because we have that stigma still, we don't want to do the wrong thing. And I remember always listening to this podcast, and it always sticks with me. It's Barack Obama, so you always potentially want to listen to somebody like that. And he said, when he was in the White House, he'd struggle with his, there was big decisions, but what he always said is, as long as we're making an improvement. So he's like, potentially I'm not going to have the right answer. We're dealing with Palestine or some of the, mental health crisis in the US, or there's many other things there. What he was saying is just, can we make it better than yesterday? And I was like, I really love that. Is actually, can we do that in the workplace? Is one, actually just start, make it better than it was the day before. So that's kind of how I think of going, okay, we've got what we've got, whether it's at New Zealand or previous workplace or in other workplaces around New Zealand, and actually just go, okay, can we make it that little bit better than it was yesterday? And as I say, even just starting is a great start, because businesses sometimes don't want to get into that because it's a bit murky. I don't understand it. And they feel uncomfortable around it. But actually just getting in there, just start. I think the go-to for a lot of businesses, or what I've seen, and again, they get a bad rap, but I'm always about the positiveness. EAP, fruit bowls, those sort of things. Even just getting those sort of things in is a great start. And you have to think also that, fruit bowls for well-being, I've slammed it in the past, but actually, when you think about it, for some workplaces, actually, that might be the only piece of fresh fruit for that person all day. So actually, start with that. But when I think about well-being programs and doing well-being and looking around mentally healthy work, is actually you need a broad scale approach. You can't just do one thing here, and that would be it. You need areas of the business you need to focus on. You can't just, I guess what I was saying is not broad scale as in one thing to cover everybody.
Yeah.
But actually you need to go into different areas of the business, into the business, and go into different units and look at their work and engage with them, talk with them, and understand what is actually going on. What are some of the things that actually are really detrimental to their well-being, their mental health? Actually listen to them about what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's so true, because there's so often we take an approach of thinking, right, we've got to do something. Let's have a workshop. Let's get Gareth to do a workshop. Let's get Lauren in to do a workshop, and that is great because I really believe in the power of education and inspiration. But on the other side, we also need to think about work design, don't we, in terms of how we're actually setting up. So tell me a bit about your thoughts on work design and designing good work.
I think also to just add to that, like you sort of say, we do a workshop and then we go back to our usual environment. I think absolutely. I see it a lot where people go, oh, I'm burnt out, or I'm not in a good space. I'm languishing at the moment, right? That's term in that Keys model. We go, you know what? Take 2 days holiday and then come back, and that's kind of the go-to fix for it. But actually, that's not a great fix, because I always think in the physical realm and physical well-being, and you think about if somebody breaks their leg or sprains their ankle or whatever it is, you'd make amendments for them to come back into work. You potentially allow them to sort of gradually return to work. You could get them to have a foot rest, that sort of thing. What are we doing in the mental health space, or in the mental health and mental well-being space? We don't tend to do that. We tend to say, take 2 days off and then come back into this intense work environment and enjoy, and then have another 2 days sick. So I've forgotten what the question you
So
asked.
asking about, designing good work, because I know you mentioned the ISO guidelines earlier, which are all around. Do you want to just tell people a bit about that in terms of that work design and some of the risks?
Yeah, so I can give an example if you like. That's probably easier.
Mm.
So we one of the first things kept come to Air New Zealand. I was hearing a lot about our contact center. For those who are not from New Zealand, it's probably familiar um, with you in your region of the world, where you're probably trying to change flights and speak with your local airline. Contact centers were just getting absolutely hammered. By calls. There's a lot of issues around COVID. What do I do? How do I do this? And so that was one of the first areas I wanted to go and work in. So I just went and worked there for a day. I just went and sat next to somebody, see what they did, learn the job. Why do you do that? Why do you do this? What is this? What is this system? Why do we use this system? Ask those sort of questions and understand that. And in terms of the design, it's like job control. So they're getting a lot of callers who are potentially quite angry. They've been there for 3 hours. Is there anything that we can do on our sort of platform or even in our app to change that so customers can actually rebook a little bit easier and change things? Can we change that? Is there something that we can do where customers can actually book a time slot rather than wait for 3 hours? Can we book a time slot and actually put a little bit of an explanation and say, I've lost my bag. And so they can go, brilliant. I'll put Lauren on it to take that call because she's an expert around baggage and how to get that back. Can we manage that workload? Our people in contact centers have had a lot to deal with over the last couple of years. They've had COVID, they've had people who want to get back into the country to see family. People have died, they want to come back. And they're saying all sorts of stuff to our people in the contact center just to get back in. And they need potentially that the MIQ. I've even almost forgot the name of it. Then the MIQ voucher before they can book flights, and so they've been absolutely harassed and bullied by people, and yet they're only given a limited time to sort of get over that call and then go on to the next call. And are we equipping them with the right tools and training to even to be able to deal with those calls? Because I was speaking with them, they were like, "Oh, I've kind of learned on the job." So, okay, what are our processes? What are our processes around supporting them in that? What are their sort of what's the word? What are they able to do if they feel harassed or bullied by a customer? Can they put the phone down? Do they feel empowered to do that? So there's all these things that we can do, around our workload, around even job security, job control, lack of job control in a contact center because you don't know who's going to turn up on the phone. What's your actual role? What are you actually doing? Because we've shrunk so much, we lost a third of our people at Air New Zealand during COVID because you might take on other people's roles and other things. Actually, as your role become blurred and you've taken on all this extra work, is our leadership engaged? Have we got leadership support there? So all these things, and there's so I can't remember how many of there is in the ISO 45003 standard, but there is many sort of examples of these job designs that you can look at to try and change the way that work is done. And I think because we've done it for so long in this way that like, I don't want to get on my soapbox, but the capitalist way of doing things, running people into the ground and onto the next one and keep going and keep going and keep going. It's hard to sort of change it back to in this way where it's a thriving environment for our people to come to work and they flourish and they love it. So
but I think it's, as you mentioned in one of the things you said earlier, like it's so much of it starts with leadership, doesn't it? It's that if your leaders, if your senior leaders are on board with this. And I've just come back from a really inspiring conference yesterday, which was all focused around corporate health and wellness. And one of the speakers there just really emphasised that point that actually we need to have some chief wellbeing officers, and that they need to be on senior leadership teams, and they need to actually be having the chance to weigh in on key decisions, just like we look at key financial KPIs, actually setting some KPIs around well-being and being effective at managing it, all these different things. And so it's really got me thinking from that point of view. There's a lot that we can do. I often talk about a three-pronged approach, which is educate and empower people with how they can look after their own well-being, and empower that in the way that you encourage those things in the workplace. and then look at great work design and managing those risks, as you talked about, and giving people as much job control as we can, and as much variety, and all those recommendations around that good work design. And then thirdly, being able to have great response. You mentioned EAP, which it's interesting because years ago I can remember, like, say 12 to 15 years ago, when I talked to organizations, what are you doing for well-being? And that was pretty much all that they came up with. We've got EAP, and we do the flu jab, Lauren, and we do drug testing, things like that. And so, those things are all important, but as I'm sure you agree, the EAP is vital, but it's also that response at the bottom of the cliff rather than being proactive. So I always talk about, having that response in-house as well, and training up, what I call wellbeing champions in-house, and also having EAP available with professionals. And I think that blend of the education, of the work design, and of responding as it's needed and having that available. Those are my thoughts anyway. Keen to hear, your opinion.
I think you're right. Like, so the work design is more the preventative. EAP, is, and again, when I do my training sessions, I really try and reframe EAP as just that bit of, when you're feeling a little bit stuck, because it's kind of that thing of, I need to be literally broken before I call EAP. And that's the hard thing as well. Using EAP myself previously, it's hard to pick up that phone because you're kind of saying to yourself, I admit defeat, but actually you're not. It's really obviously a strong thing to do. But yeah, as I say, EAPs have been the go-to. And look, they're, like you say, great start. It's a really good initiative. They've got some good supports there. And also, like you sort of said in my introduction, they ripple out. A lot of EAPs do it for families or immediate family as well. Fantastic. I know the New Zealand mental health system is not in a great shape. So to be able to give families that opportunity who potentially wouldn't be able to access a psychologist or a counsellor very, very quickly is fantastic. A great resource. But also you need to have other things across the business to tackle these, the mental health issues and the well-being of the people, and be in the more preventative space. But, we're doing really good in the reactive space, in that sort of towards the bottom of the cliff, top of the cliff kind of thing. But we need more definitely in that preventative space. And that's where the work design comes in. And that's where those great tools, I know Australia's moved to looking at they've got codes of practice now. It's coming into law around looking at psychosocial risks, which are those risks that can impact your mental health. So there's all these resources that are there to just be used by businesses. It just needs to go to that next step. And
yeah, great. And so tell me, what do you see as being some of the pitfalls when it comes to mental health in the workplace?
I think I've just kind of alluded to some of them in this conversation already. But as I say, sweeping initiatives don't work generally. But it's a start potentially. EAP usage is 10% and less. If it's better than that, great. But I think also when we do these initiatives, sometimes we send an email out and that's it. And change doesn't happen with one email. Change takes time. You need to keep re-engaging, like you talked about, wellbeing champions. Fantastic, amazing. Those people are like the lifeblood in your mental health strategy. You need those people to help that change. They're your leaders, they're your champions in your business. As I said to you prior to recording today, there's 2 of us at Air New Zealand for 11,000 people. There's no way we can get across everybody. So actually having those people who you can check in with and have a bit of a pulse check, great stuff. It's great stuff. So yeah, having those people. I think I've gone off piste a little bit from the pitfalls, but I think we've talked about the lack of leadership buy-in. I think there's only so much you can do as workers. I think having those champions to build up that sort of, how can I describe it, sort of rumblings underneath the leadership. I think if you have that momentum and have that belief and buy-in from people underneath, I think the leadership will slowly start to hear and hopefully engage around well-being and mental health in the workplace. I think also it might be a health and safety thing, but I think we like to copy and paste, and that's okay. But we like to go, oh, that's good. I'm going to use that and bring it into my business. But there's nuances to different businesses, nuances to different cultures and everything else. So if you are going to do that, actually look at it and try it out. So as I say, we tend to do broad sweeping things. Let's do it across the business. It'll be great. It'll be all shiny and new. Actually, why don't you try it in a smaller team? try it in a team, I don't know, 50 people. If I don't know the size of businesses, but let's
Mm,
say your business is 1,000 people, try it in a team of 50 people. See what happens. Okay, that's worked there. Let's change it a little bit for the next one. Let's go to 150 people and then slowly expand it out. Because actually
I like
that
that.
will be better. Right.
Yeah,
Start.
and
I
I
always
like
say,
that idea of, sorry, I like
start
that
small.
idea of experimenting as well, which sounds like a
Yes.
little bit of what you're alluding to. I always
Yes, it is.
recommend the individuals experiment as well. When I talk about, let's say, one of my live well principles, start the day right, is figure out what's your best morning routine to help set you up for a great day, in terms of your mental health, in terms of everything. And, if that's a new concept for someone, then I always recommend just experiment, jot down, brainstorm some ideas. What are the things that could be part of your morning routine? And
Mm,
then actually give it a go, but don't feel like, oh, that didn't work if you didn't enjoy it the first day or the first week. Treat it as an experiment and then come back to it. And I love that idea of try something out and then you can get the feedback. If you've tried it out with your group of 5 team members, then maybe you share it with now 20 and you just go on in
mm. That
iterations.
ripple effects as you talk about, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the pitfalls have you seen? Have you seen any pitfalls?
Yeah, I think that, as you say, we have covered a lot of them. Probably the biggest one is the lack of leadership,
Yeah.
real buy-in and accountability. And it's interesting because I'm just researching a book at the moment and really digging into a lot of the statistics around
Mm,
why this is important, because I can absolutely see that, when business leaders are looking at budgets and projections and spreadsheets and goals and KPIs, that it can be seen as something you just tack on the end. Oh, yeah, we should keep our people well as well. And I think it is, flipping that mindset to realize, okay, how do we build the best culture that
mm,
supports the best people to be at their best so that flows through to everything? And we know from the research that, yeah, there's just so many levers. I look at,
mm,
one small thing. I've just been writing the chapter on appreciation, for example. And, if you could improve productivity by 24% by finding something that you could just do that virtually costs nothing, would you do it? You could say that to a
mm.
leader. Would you just do something that could improve productivity by 24%? And they'd probably go, oh, that sounds interesting. What is that? And well, it just means that you double the amount of times that you praise and thank people. If you got your
Mm.
leaders to just go out and thank people and appreciate people twice as much as they're currently doing it, then that's going to boost productivity. It's going to reduce, I think it was reduce turnover and attrition by around 11%, which right
Probably.
now with
Yeah.
the talent shortage and such, challenges around turnover is huge. I mean, that alone. So it's interesting because we know, I mean, I know I'm talking to the converted here and probably those listening as well, that you've potentially got an interest in that. And so if you are in a position where perhaps you're wanting to try and influence those leaders, I think it's, great to get some of those resources, some of those stats, and actually share that so you have a bit of
Mm,
a case of evidence, or a body of evidence to put your case forward to get
mm.
leaders on board. And then for me, it's about giving people really small practical things they can do now, that they don't have to keep thinking, oh, I'll just wait until I have more time, because we know
Mm.
that day is not going to come. Life
Yeah.
is very unlikely to get less busy unless you cultivate that and follow the principles from essentialism from Greg McKeown, for example. So what are the small things we can do now? And I love the analogy of, small levers can swing big doors. It's
Mm.
just, I've been doing a lot of leadership training lately, and it's small things at the end of, a 4-hour training session where I've just talked through all these principles. We talked about trust and connection and well-being and risk factors and all these things. And I ask people, what's your key takeaway of something you're going to action? And it is very simple things like, I am going to make sure I take my breaks away from my desk, because
Mm.
people are realizing the impact that has in the role that you set, as you role model. And I
Yeah.
know one thing that Liam shared yesterday, Liam, your colleague in New Zealand, he talked about 3 key things that leaders can do that really improves performance. And then it really stood in my mind. And that was show appreciation for people, show understanding for people and the pressures that they've got going on, and
Mm.
role model great work-life
Mm.
balance themselves. And when leaders do those 3 things, that has an impact. So yeah, kudos to him. That was great.
I'll just add to that. It was quite interesting. I was down in Christchurch yesterday because we're doing some employee expos to sort of show what some of the supports we have and some of the I don't know, perks we have for our workers. So it's been quite good. But one of the things you talked about there was just getting away from your desk. I
Mm,
was down in the engineering and maintenance. So they're fixing all the engines and all the planes and stuff. And it's still a little bit, I won't say old school in that way, but old school in the way that actually they go and have dinner together or lunch together. And I was
yeah,
like,
nice.
it was so refreshing to watch these, big burly men. Probably, I had to prize them away to come and talk to me about mental well-being and mental health. But I was just watching them, and they were eating all the lunches, some were playing cards, and just that whole thing. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, you don't see that as much in offices these days, where people come together and go, I'm going to have this slot, and I'm going to
Yeah.
go away and have chat with my mates over dinner, like I did at school. You'd have a chat, and then you'd probably go and, I don't know, play football or rugby or whatever it is at
Yeah.
lunchtime. I
Yeah,
just
I
thought that
love
was
that.
really quite beautiful and quite rare in these days,
Yeah,
to see
and it
that.
is something we can cultivate. But as you say, because a lot of people and a lot of my clients, particularly, are knowledge workers, and so and I embrace flexibility. I think flexibility is great. However,
Mm,
there are, we know, some downsides to if you're working 100% from home. We know that that has a higher risk of burnout, and then some of the downsides
mm,
of that blur. And do you just feel like you're always working? But we know that, particularly in the office, I'm sure this you'd love to hear some of your examples of simple things that we can do to build connection. And one that comes to mind for me is, maybe have a set day of the week where it's like soup Friday and you just get a crock pot going. And I know of workplaces where everyone just brings in a vegetable and you just add it and then you share that for lunch. And it's just such a small,
yeah,
simple idea, but it really creates connection. Or another one is, have a lunch club. So it's like I'll bring lunch on Monday and Gareth will bring lunch on Tuesday and Liam will bring lunch on Wednesday and Tracy will bring it
yeah,
on Thursday, and Friday's a flexi day. And so, I'm looking forward to it. I'm thinking, okay, what is Gareth going to bring on Wednesday? Like, what am I going to bring on Monday? And great time saver, great money saver, great nutrition boost,
mm,
because people are actually bringing in something that's hopefully a little wholesome as well.
yeah,
But what I love about it is that you're connecting around that, Kai. So
mm.
any other, just thinking, for those that are listening, and any other tidbits of little ideas or specific things that you've seen that have worked well?
Around a connection in the office.
Yeah, and
Um,
anything to do with mental well-being. Yeah.
I think what we do every week, because we're kind of the team, it's hard to get all the team together, and we recognize that, and that's quite, because we're here, there, and everywhere. But what we do say on our Friday calls every week is, when are you in the office next week? So people go, I'm Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to change my date from Tuesday, and I'm going to come in on Wednesday now, because actually I don't want to be sat with on my own, or there's two of us or whatever. I actually want to be in with everybody else. So actually trying to
Mm,
align our calendars to go, oh, you know what? Actually, I can come in on that day. Even as you say, doesn't necessarily even have to be making lunches or anything. It just needs to be, I'm actually just sat with people and I feel the energy from around the room. Because
mm,
there's nothing worse than going to an office and just you on your own, or you're in a corner by yourself. So
mm,
actually just knowing the people around you and feeling, I think that was the thing that I noticed when we first came out of lockdown in, what was it, June 2020. And actually just being in the office and just, it's just so nice to feel people around you.
yeah.
That's all I needed, is that buzz of an office around me. And I was like, oh, I've missed that so much.
Yeah.
Just to have that was really empowering for me.
Mm, fantastic. Oh, it's been so great to talk to you, Gareth. If people did want to find out more or just connect with you and continue the conversation, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. Um, yeah, love it on LinkedIn. There's so many great things. I love to connect with people, learn from them. I think that's one sort of takeaway in terms of moving forward and recommending, is just connect with people. The amount of people I've connected with and learned from them, even just little tidbits, and conversations like this come from LinkedIn. It's just an
Mm.
incredible platform. I don't work for LinkedIn, but this is
Yes.
good. It's really
Yes.
good.
Wonderful. And for those that are listening in, if you haven't seen already, we have the show notes down below. So feel free to connect in. You've got the link through to Gareth down there. And make sure you do head to thrivetvshow.com. If you're listening on another platform, if you wanted to watch the video version of the Thrive TV show, just head to thrivetvshow.com. So just to wrap up, one final question, Gareth, and that is, if you could share one more thing with our listeners today, what would that be?
Um, One more thing. I think I'd love to say, just obviously we talked about LinkedIn there, but actually just connect with people, especially depending on, we started this conversation around how did you get into this sort of well-being. I actually started connecting with people, whether it's on LinkedIn, learn from people, have those people who are kind of like mentors that you can, we can't all do this in silos. We can't do this by ourselves. We need to do it as a community, as a team. So actually learning from other people and having that sort of widespread knowledge from from a community. So that's what I recommend is getting engaged with people and learning from other people as well.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for the time. I know it took us a while to align our diaries, so it's such a pleasure to connect with you and have that conversation.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Lauren.
So thank you to everyone that's tuned in. That's been another episode of the Thrive TV show. Go out and thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons. Visit thrivetvshow.com to access the show notes and discover our fantastic bonus content. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring episode.